Hi, I'm Megan Kuhn with Powerhouse Real Estate. Today I'm going to answer the question that I've been getting of should you buy an Airbnb in 2023? During the pandemic, Airbnbs became a huge topic, buying short-term rental properties because short-term investment property loans were killer during that time. Interest rates were low, and so lots of investors were jumping in, purchasing properties while they had the opportunity. So now there's lots of Airbnbs out there. The talk is high. And so a lot of people are wondering, should you buy one now that interest rates are up? So I'm going to answer that question for you today. A couple of things to consider when you're thinking of a short-term rental are, number one, affordability. As rates are higher, it's a lot harder to get cash flow right away because your loan terms are not as good. So your payments are higher. So even though you can collect a good amount of rent because we still have good high rent rates, as far as short-term rentals go, you still have to consider what your payment is and if that's going to pay you back as far as rentals. So that's something that you have to consider, and you have to understand where your payment is going to be. So talking to a lender about that first thing is going to be helpful so that you can understand where that payment's going to be based on how much you're willing to spend. Right now, short-term rentals, it's a little bit of an oversaturated market. So a few years ago, you could buy them almost anywhere and they would perform really well. But as hotels have gone back into production and traveling has become a little bit easier as things have opened up, people are choosing hotels over Airbnbs more often, is what we're finding. Other than big families, so if you have a bigger unit that can house a lot of people, so if you have multiple families traveling together, they love the idea of staying in one location all together and having kind of a party home base, as well as for work retreats. There's a lot of people hosting work retreats in these big Airbnbs because they're beautiful locations, they can house a lot of people, and it's a lot more cost effective than hotel rooms when it comes to a big group of people. So the bigger units are still performing really well. However, when it comes to these smaller units, hotels are actually performing better because it's a safer bet. If you're traveling with a small group or you're just going to stay by yourself somewhere, a hotel's a safer bet. You never know what you're going to get with an Airbnb. The facilities at a hotel are sometimes better as far as restaurants, the pools, the locations. And so that's where we're seeing this turn. These smaller units are taking a bit of a hit because they just don't have those facilities, and the hotels are definitely performing better. On that same note, location is really big right now. These resort locations and these really high demand places are still seeing great activity. But you might have purchased an Airbnb in a more rural location because they were performing well at the time. People were staying almost anywhere in an Airbnb or a short-term rental over hotels because hotels were just shut down. They were hard to get into. And so now we're seeing those more rural or less advantageous locations performing a lot lower, but the higher resort locations, the high demand travel locations are doing really well, even some of the smaller units there. So that's something to really consider when you're looking at buying a short-term rental, is the location is going to be key. Short-term rentals do require maintenance, so that's something that you also need to consider when you're looking at purchasing a property. So if it's somewhere that's far away from where you currently live, it needs to be able to be maintained. So you might need to hire a property manager. That's going to add extra cost to it. If there's an HOA that will cover a lot of the maintenance, that can actually be really helpful because then the grounds are taken care of. You know that the outside is going to be well cared for. You'll still have to hire cleaning crews and things like that. And so make sure that as you add up all of these costs, you're considering those things as far as what the ultimate cost is for maintaining the property, keeping it clean, and having people coming in and out of the property. Who's going to let them in? Who's going to run over there if there's an emergency? Some locations that are high demand Airbnb locations actually require that you have a property manager living within a certain mile so that if something happens, there's somebody available. So those are things that you can work with your agent on, and things that are going to be very much determined by location, and just some things to think about. If I've talked you out of buying an Airbnb or short-term rental this year, long-term rentals are still performing really well, and there's a lot of pros to that. But there's a new kid in town that I want to tell you about, and that is midterm rentals. Midterm rentals are a new thing that we're seeing coming up and performing really well. These are rentals that are 30-day minimum lease, however, less than 6 months. So we're not quite to a long term, but we're definitely longer than these nightly rentals that we're seeing for less than a week. So these are still furnished by the landlord, so it's still an expense you'd have to do to furnish the property. However, they are a lot less maintenance. You don't have to bring a cleaning crew in multiple times throughout the month to get the home ready for the next renters. It's more of a long term, so you don't have those little costs that come up throughout the month. We see this working well for business travel. So if somebody's coming in and staying in a location for trainings or whatnot for more than a week, they like to stay somewhere comfortable that's not in the hotel environment. It's also cheaper for them to stay somewhere long term that's not a hotel. We're also seeing this work well for people that are in between homes. Maybe they're building or their next home isn't quite ready to close, but they have to be out of their current home or rental. Then we're able to then put them into a midterm rental. It's less than 6 months, but it is more than a week. And so they're going to be more comfortable in a home environment versus a hotel that has a kitchen and etc. Also, family that might be traveling, maybe kids are graduating or they're having grandbabies in a location that they don't live in. They might want to stay long term, but not with their kids. This is working well for them because it's a comfortable place for them to stay, but it's again not a hotel situation. The pros and cons to having a midterm rental versus a long-term or a nightly rental is going to be, number one, the rates. Your rates can be a little bit, they're going to be in between a nightly rental rate and a long-term rental rate. So you can charge more than a long-term rate because it is a convenience to be able to rent it for less than 6 months, depending on the situation. However, you are going to charge less than a nightly rate. And so that's something to consider depending on what your cash flow is and what you want that to be. Now, on that same note, having it less than the nightly rate, you still might net more because you are keeping it booked for the full 30 days. Maybe your daily rate is less with a nightly rental, but maybe you're only booked out 2 weeks out of the month. So overall, you're going to be netting more because you're able to charge that nightly rate for the whole month instead of just a small portion of the month like a nightly rental. Another thing to consider is with a midterm or short-term rental, you do have to furnish the property, which is going to be an extra cost to you. If you're looking at a long-term rental, you can't charge quite as much monthly, but you don't have to worry about furnishings. You don't have to worry about things getting ruined. As people are staying there midterm, things do tend to be taken care of a little bit better because they are there, living there, they keep up on it a little bit better. However, they are there longer, so you're not able to keep track of things as easy, and so things might get ruined more than a short-term rental. It really just depends on the location, the situation, and why they're renting it for. So you will want to make sure you vet people as they come into long-term and understand why they need it and what they're going to be using it for, so that you can really keep a good tab on your things that are in there and how they're going to be treating them. Hopefully this answered some of your questions that you might have had about buying a rental property this year. If you have more questions about it, you'd like to run some numbers with me, I'd love that opportunity to meet with you. I service here in Utah specifically, so if you're in the market, give me a call. I'm Megan with Powerhouse Real Estate.